Okay, I love it. All right. So, Miles, welcome to the Better Humans podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time on a Friday at the end of the day to come on and talk with me about all the amazing stuff that's going on in your life and your customers' lives and in business and all that stuff. So, thank you for coming on the show. I wanted to start off by doing something that's really fun that I know that you do whenever you get into a room. And I want to do it for any of the podcast listeners. So Miles does hypnosis. Ooh.
So
Ooh,
can I tell you something?
hypnosis.
I got to tell you something really funny. Speaking of that, so you know how we do that? I do that in the room, and when I say hypnosis, everybody does that.
Uh-huh.
Yesterday at Woodstock Business Club, I got handed the mic, and before I could say anything, the whole room went, "Ooh!" I said, "Ooh!" I did. I got you guys to say "ooh" before I even said anything. That's powerful right there.
Yeah, some might call it hypnosis.
That's right.
I love it. Oh man. Okay, cool. So, um, Miles, I wanted to start off the conversation with us today because, like, okay, really fast, just so anyone's really listening, they're not like, hey, he didn't just bring like a crackpot on here, right? Like, can you like level with everybody? Like, yes, you do hypnosis, but it's like a tool in your tool belt. Can you tell everyone kind of like what you actually do?
Right. Yeah, so I'm a mindset and performance coach. And what I do, so hypnosis is one of the things I'm trained in. I'm also a master practitioner of neuro linguistic programming, or NLP for short. And
Mm,
really, the distinction there, what separates NLP and hypnosis coaching from your standard coaching is the work that happens at the unconscious level, right? So we have our conscious mind and our unconscious mind. Our conscious mind is everything that we're aware of. Our unconscious mind is everything that we're not aware of, right? And so I just used this example today. If we were to take the phrase, Johnny is drowning at work, consciously, you and I can agree that Johnny's not literally submerged underwater, right? It's a
right, right,
metaphor. But at the unconscious level, drowning at work has it has a symbolic meaning to it. The unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between something that's real versus something that's imagined, right? So unconsciously, that can trigger a stress response, right? So there's things that happen at the unconscious level that we don't even realize are happening, right? How we
Well,
talk,
so
how we
hey, really
think.
fast. Do you want to
Yeah,
know what? So, like me as a person,
yeah,
I'm a like literal and imaginative person, and so I see things before I like comprehend things. So your
right,
sentence and the cadence with which you said it, Johnny is drowning, and literally I was like, dude's underwater. Dude's under, and that is
right,
immediately what I saw in my head. And then you added the
right.
context at work, and I went, "Oh, Johnny's not. There's no
Oh,
real
right,
danger. Johnny's just having a hard
right.
time, right?"
Right. No, that's exactly right. Like our language is very powerful, right? And so
Right.
how we say what we say consciously, we can kind of be like, okay, yeah, that's silly. But at the unconscious level, you might have that response. Someone else might have gone, oh, he's drowning at work before I said at work. And so perception, right? We're looking at how everyone the way everyone perceives something is different. And
Right.
NLP and hypnosis looks at how are we actually perceiving what's going on around us? And our thoughts that come from within us quite literally shape our perception. And when we change the way we think, we can change our perception and make ourselves more likely to be successful. Right. So that's the performance aspect of the coaching. So if we can enhance our mindset, we can enhance the way we think about what we think about. We have a more predictable path to success or growth or whatever it is we want.
Yeah. I like the way that you've positioned that. The way that my brain is immediately kind of like interpreting this is that like in its current state, it's a not a weak brain, just like an untrained brain. Like I have an untrained brain that will maybe like auto path me to the like decisions and reactions and outcomes that maybe I don't consciously want. And so I need to train my brain to move towards the things that I do want as opposed to the things that I don't want. Am I getting the right idea here from what you've explained?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Yes. Everyone has things they do well, everyone has things they don't do well, right? If we can begin to understand how we do things well, we can replicate it, right? If we know,
Yeah.
understand at the unconscious level how I make a decision to do something or not do something, well, we can replicate that. So that way, when it's time to make a decision to do something, instead of procrastinating, we actually do it, right? Or
Gotcha.
maybe
Yeah.
procrastination would make sense, right? Depending on context, right? We might want to put off doing something in order to do something else. Anyway, yeah, that if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay.
But yeah, to answer your
Yeah.
question, yes. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, Miles, I went back and I looked at your Instagram. I chose your Instagram because first off, it's very well branded. Like, I'm just gonna give you a tiny mic applause for that. Like, I love your Instagram. I love the way it's branded. But I went like way, way back on it, and I'll tell you why here in a little bit. Like, why I usually when I talk to people, I go back in their past. Then and there's a good reason for it. But like I found one of the first videos that you ever put out, and you have a video of you like doing a bow and drill fire. And obviously
Mm,
you had like a message tied behind all of that. But I
right.
actually am curious now because like that's one of the things that personally I'm really interested in, and I've done a couple times is like bushcrafting and like wilderness survival and like outdoors training and stuff like that. Is that something that you do, or was that just
I,
like I just learned it once and moved on, or like how do
no,
you are you an outdoorsman or a bushcrafter?
I can't. So context. I worked in a wilderness therapy program for about 2 years.
What?
So yeah, that's so cool that you found that video. Yeah, so I worked in a wilderness therapy program out in Utah, and
Okay.
yeah, I worked with it was um, a program for at teens and adolescents ages 13 to 17 that struggled with sexual based problems, pornography addiction, sexually acting out, um, anything sexually based. And what made this program super unique is that there are no other wilderness therapy programs that work with that specific demographic because of all the high risk implications with it.
Sure.
It's
Right,
really
right, right.
um, but essentially, I was a field staff, so I would go out on a 4 days on, 3 days off schedule, and I would be with the clients out there, and we'd hike, we'd do all sorts of hard skills, all sorts of soft skills too. Right? They're out there because, first of all, they can't. They're the quickest way to eliminate a behavior like pornography is to go out into the wilderness where you don't have access to technology.
Oh, sure. Right, right.
And part of the things that the students or the clients had to learn was a bunch of different hard skills, right? How to build shelter, how to tie knots, how to identify plants, how to make glue out of poop and sap, right? Like super useful, practical stuff. One of the other ones was how to make fire through bow drill, hand drill,
Okay.
all this stuff. And as a staff, you have to learn it too.
Yeah,
And
that makes sense.
yeah, and so that was one of the skills we had to learn was how to make a fire. And
Huh.
yeah, yeah, it's cool. There's a lot of it's a really cool skill to have, and it's also a very there's a lot of the hard skill aspect, but then there's metaphor and symbolism behind it too, because it's a skill. Like it's hard. It's hard to do if you don't know how to do it. You have to
Yeah.
have all the right components. If one of your components is off by a little bit, you have to work like exponentially harder. So it teaches you how to set up a bunch of dominoes. So that way when you click one domino, all of them just fall. So it's effortless. And so there's a lot of really cool lessons behind building making
Yeah. That is really interesting. So I've made I made a
Have you
bushcraft
done a
fire, but I
bow
had
drill?
a no. I've never done a bow drill, but I've done a ferro rod, right? But I only had a ferro rod, so that means like
Right.
you need to be really selective about like the wood that you pick and like its dampness and like is it a pine? Did you get fat wood? Did you do like shavings and did you queue up all the different stages of the fire that you're gonna build? And it's like it's thoughtfulness and planning before you ever actually like strike the rod
Yes.
to make the fire. Because if you burn the stuff that you collected for early in the beginning, but you didn't prep for the middle or the end, guess what? You're doing it
Right.
all over again. Back to the woods for you.
Yes, we had no. So we had a client one time that was really struggling to build make a fire. You have once you have all the hard skills you have to learn, and they have to get it checked off by a staff before they're have been approved that they can do that hard skill.
Right.
And part of the bow drill fire is when you're doing the bow because you need to make what's called an ember or a coal, an active coal, because that's what essentially when you put it into nesting and you see that when I blow it, the
Yeah.
flame goes. You need something that will ignite, right? And so you have to have nesting, you have to have all this preparation. Well, he was so focused on his form and his technique, and it took him probably 3 or 4 days to really get it down, and he finally got a coal, but he had forgotten to gather nesting and make a nest. So he had his coal, and we're
Mm.
like, all right, so and so, go put it in your nesting. And he goes, what nesting? He forgot. And so his coal went out. And he's like,
Oh.
damn it. So he had a powerful lesson, right? You have to prep. Just because you know how to do something and you can do it really well, if there's preparation involved, and you have to start all over. And so he was
Oh.
really pissed off, but it was a valuable lesson for him.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. I love that. So the reason I went back on a lot of your social stuff is because I love going back in time to like what was the tipping point for entrepreneurs that like pushed them into becoming the person that they eventually would become. So like who you are today. And there's a principle in that as well as like if you're going to go out and help others, like usually who you're helping is someone 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. As you learn, as you like reach that tipping point and decided to change and become and do and achieve and believe and all that stuff, it's like that's the person you were really help. So I went like back to like hopefully tease out like who was Miles like beforehand and kind of like understand you a little better. So for for you, what what do you believe was like the tripping point for you to become Miles mindset and business coach and a master NLP practitioner? Like, what was your tripping point there?
That's a great question. As an entrepreneur, what made me decide I wanted to like go out and do things on my own, go out and coach? Um, so there's a few parts to that answer. Can I answer it in parts?
You can do anything.
Whatever the hell I want. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I'll give some context. When I was 9 years old, I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome. I don't know if I've talked to you about this before. Um,
Yes, you
okay.
have.
So at 9, I was diagnosed with Tourette's. And I'm going to preface this by saying this is an anecdotal story, right? This is my personal experience. And so I had all sorts of different motor and vocal tics, right? I would twitch, I would yell, I would kind of bend over to the side, I would cough, I would gasp. And so at a very young age, I stood out, literally and figuratively. And I was bullied a lot. Um, and so I feel like at a very young age, I had to develop a lot of resilience. At Not on purpose. I just kind of did it because I had to. It was like a survival. And
Right.
I've always been very. I'm 6'3". I'm 190 pounds. I'm a big guy, and I've always been a big kid. Like I was always the biggest in my class, and I was a gentle giant. Right. I hated. doing anything physical. So I was always very gentle and kind and compassionate. And I think just having Tourette's and going through those struggles, I was naturally really good at finding people who were also struggling and being able to connect and relate to them. And so that was one of the gifts, right? I try to look at everything in life, all the bad things that happen in life. Let's look at them in the frame of um, how is this actually a good thing, right? How did this make me stronger? How did this
Yeah.
make me better? And I, so now let's fast forward so I can get to the answer to your question. So I'd always been interested in helping people and working with people, right? So I did, when I worked in wilderness therapy, that was actually a year or two before I learned NLP and hypnosis. So I've always been interested in kind of doing that kind of work, doing it in a
Yeah.
different way, right? Who else do you know that has worked in wilderness therapy? Like I like doing like oddball, weird stuff
I only
that,
know like two other people that have like wilderness related jobs. I mean, it's kind of like we're at the point in humanity where it's like, yeah, we have cars and roads and planes, and it's like you don't
right,
really need to know the woods anymore.
right. Right. No, absolutely. No, it's totally unique, which I really appreciate. I like doing
I do
things
too.
that
Yeah.
are different. Yeah, I think there's a lot of I get value. I get a lot of value out of doing things that are different, but are also very impactful. And I I forgot where I was going with that line of thought. Anyway, and I was originally in school for psychology, right? But traditional education and I didn't get along. I don't know. I guess I like
Right.
to rebel. And I began to realize that I also didn't want to study psychology because I realized, at least from my perspective, psychology focuses way too much on what's wrong with people. I believe, right? There's um, it focuses on what people struggle with and their problems. And I was in as a kid and as a teenager in therapy for quite some time for a lot of different things, and I got a lot of benefit out of it. But at a certain point, I needed something different. I needed to focus on what was next, right? I wanted to go
You,
into situations and not understand why I was anxious. I wanted to be able to go into a situation that I was anxious in and not be anxious anymore. Therapy for me,
yeah.
counseling didn't provide that, right? Counseling for me provided an understanding of what I was going through and why I was going through it. And if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so I kind of started to when you go on YouTube and you start going down different rabbit holes, I,
Yeah.
I, that's more likely now, right? No wilderness, but we're all on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I stumbled across Tony Robbins for the first time, and
Mm.
he was working with a gentleman who had a stutter. I'm sure you could find the video on YouTube. And I immediately was like, "Ooh, I want to watch this." Tony worked with him for like 7 minutes, and the guy's up on stage and he's talking and he's got no stutter. And I'm like, that's wild. I was skeptical at first, if I'm being honest. I was like, what the heck? But that was my
I
first,
have a I have a question. At this
yeah,
point, you still present Tourette's symptoms, correct?
correct. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Right
Um,
bait, right fish, right hook, you know?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking about it Tourette's at that point. That was just, yeah, I
But
was
okay, so
exhausted.
what so really quick, it wasn't
Yeah.
like on your radar that like, okay, Tony just worked with this guy and he doesn't have a stutter. Like, were you piecing or breadcrumbing together that like maybe if like Tony did it to me, I wouldn't have Tourette's?
No, no, that wasn't a thought.
Wow.
Um, no, not even a little. No,
Huh.
because I grow listen, when you're 9 years old and you got a bunch of doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists and neurologists telling you, hey, you have Tourette's, you're going to have it your whole life and it's going to be a struggle. That's that's the story you buy into, right?
Okay, so
And
it was
there's very,
life sentence in your head, basically. You're like,
of
that's
course,
great for that guy, but this is what's for me.
I didn't even have that thought because Tourette's and stuttering are two totally different things, right?
Sure, sure.
It's a neural, in the framework of our medical system, it's a neurological diagnosis. It's incurable, right? So that's why I'm saying I'm speaking from this purely anecdotal. This is not a scientific uh, study. That's not what this is. My perception was, oh, I have this and I'm going to have it my whole life and it's going to be a struggle. So the thought of not having the symptoms of Tourette's, my tics were, it wasn't even, didn't even cross my mind. It wasn't an option. I didn't even know to think about that.
Right.
And so fast forward a couple years, turns out where I was living in Utah, there were NLP and hypnosis certification trainings, like literally like 7 minutes from where I was living. And I didn't realize this. Tony's trained in NLP and hypnosis. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's cool. He doesn't call it that some because of we'll discuss that another time, but that's what he's trained in. And anyway, we're in the training and I did the training for two reasons. Coaching, there's no licensing involved with coaching, right? I think we've talked about this. So it's a double-edged sword. So anyone can go out and call themselves a coach, which means you're going to
Yep.
have a bunch of really poor quality people who don't know what they're doing. It's a problem. We can talk about that. That's a whole nother topic of discussion. The upside is you don't have to spend 6, 7, 8 years in education and go tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And
Correct. Yeah.
then by the time you're done with school, not even go into the field that you were studying, right? So there, that was number one reason. Number two reason was I wanted something credible. I didn't want a certification where I would go online and watch some slideshows and answer a 75 out of 75% and be able to print out a certificate that says, congratulations, you are certified as a life coach from lifecoach.com. There's a lot of coaches out there that's like, okay, what skills do you have? What are you doing? I didn't want that. I wanted something that separated me from the rest of the crowd. And I wanted legitimate skill set. So, and this training was going to provide that. And the other thing was I'm massive advocate for personal development. I want to be better. I think the moment we decide that we're good and we no longer need to grow is the moment we start to decline. So I'm always wanting to elevate.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Uh, yeah. And so I did the training for those two reasons and game changer, man. I think everybody should do an NLP and hypnosis training at some point in their life because it's so powerful. And personally, for me, on the fifth day of the training, the trainer did about a 6 minute process with me. Didn't realize what was happening. And all of my tics, by the time the process was done, were gone. And the urge to tick was gone. And it was so profound for me. And again, personal anecdotal story. This is not me
I
saying
totally.
that
Yeah.
everyone with Tourette I'm not saying everyone with Tourette's should go do NLP and hypnosis because it'll get rid of their tics. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I was in a headspace to do something that worked really, really well. And by the time the process was done, it quite literally, I was trying to remember what it was like to tick, and I could not, it was like I couldn't access it. And it's imagine constantly having an itch on your forearm. And then all of a sudden you're expecting yourself to scratch the itch, but you're like, wait a minute, I don't need to. There's no itch there anymore. And so your other hand is like, wait, I want to scratch the itch, but there's no itch. So I guess I don't need to scratch the itch. It was
So
weird.
that's really interesting because I think I just got an ad a little bit ago
Yeah.
that there's some station that's producing a show about a girl with Tourette's, and I think she's like 21 or 23 or something like that. And
Yeah.
they're doing the filming and everything, and she explained it. She was like, Tourette's is like having an itching, burning feeling inside of you as your tick
Yep.
is like approaching. And then as you like
Right.
release the tick, then the
Right.
itching burning subsides. And it's at least
Right.
until like the next time that it boils up that it's like, I gotta let it out, and then it goes.
Right. Yeah.
You felt kind of
Yeah.
like the
That's a
same thing?
perfect. Yeah, that's a great description of what it feels like to when there's a tick, right? It's like you feel there's sometimes you're aware of an itch and sometimes you're not aware of an itch, right? Like sometimes you just scratch an itch and you don't realize you're scratching it until when you're scratching it, right?
Right.
So it's happening unconsciously. It's a good metaphor for it. But imagine not having the itch anymore. Like the itch is gone. Like
That's crazy.
it was paradigm shifting for me. So why I named my business Possibilities Unlimited Coaching. Because going into that, like I said, kind of when I was talking about watching Tony work with the gentleman who had the stutter, I wasn't even thinking about not ticking. I couldn't even imagine that container was not only was it not even open, I didn't know it existed
Hmm.
because I was I had a belief system that was so locked in place because ever since I was 9 and everyone was telling me everything they told me. By the way, I had no anger or resentment for any of the doctors, neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists who did what they did. They're doing what they're trained to do,
Yeah.
right? That,
Yeah.
good. They're doing their job, right? That's the whole point of what they're doing, and they did a great job. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. So there's no resentment there. It was just it was such a profound shift for me, and really, the big learning I got from it was how can I actually take this and apply this and when I'm coaching and working with people from a mindset perspective. And the lesson I got is that no one has problems. They have perceptions of problems, right? They come up into some sort of a situation and some sort of condition, whether it's in life, whether it's in business, whether it's in family, whether it's in their relationships, whether it's financial, and they come up to it. And if they get stuck, it's not because of the situation, it's because of the way they're looking at it. Or maybe it's the way they're talking to themselves about it, right? Because if you and I come up to the same situation and I'm actionable and you're not, and you're in your head, what does that say? The situation's exactly the same. Our unconscious perception of it's different.
Yep.
And you or I, just because I'm actionable and you're not, doesn't mean I'm right and you're wrong. That's not the point. We don't need to judge it as right or wrong. It's just different. I have a different perspective than you do. The question is, which perspective is more efficient and more effective in getting us what we want in life, in business, in any context in life? And that's really the big lesson I got from that experience is, oh, everything's based on perspective. It's all about how we're thinking about things. And if we can change the way we think about what we think about, God, we don't have problems, we have possibilities.
I hope you're
Question is,
not watching my face, by the way. My face is probably saying like all this stuff, and I'm literally just thinking in my head, like, man, how does this apply to me? How does this apply to me? Like,
right,
if I've got problems, like the problems aren't really the problem. The problem is my perspective on the problem.
right. And let's be real. I think it's important to preface this. Say we're in okay, I'm running I was the other day, I was running late to a meeting, like very late to a meeting. And I don't like being late. I like being on time. I'm very big on being either early or right on time because I
Right.
value when other people are on time and respectful of my time. I was running late. And of course, as you're running late, what happens when you're on the road? You hit all the red lights.
Yep.
And I'm like, shit, God damn it. Ah. all the red lights. And so I'm like looking at the time. It's like I'm supposed to be there at 3. It's 3:06. I can't text or call him because there's traffic. I'm like, and so I'm in my mind thinking, oh God, they're gonna be so upset, blah blah blah. And all of a sudden I went, wait a minute, how am I looking at this? How is me freaking out about this helping anyone, let alone me, right? It's not. It's
Right.
making my stress go up. In fact, it's probably making me tense, which is going to make me more likely to cause an accident or do something silly that's not going to do anyone any good. So I made a decision right then and there. Anytime there's a yellow light, a red light, I'm just gonna kind of giggle because it's kind of a silly situation if you really think about it. I'm running late
Okay.
and every light I'm hitting is red. So it's like, oh, okay, the universe is working against me. Maybe I can laugh at it a little bit. And I completely changed my attitude just by making that decision. Now, the important thing is just because I changed my perception, it doesn't necessarily change the condition, right? I was still running late, right? I was still might have to deal with someone who might have been a little upset that I was late. There's validity, there's reality of that, right?
Yeah.
But my attitude allows me to handle that situation in a much more efficient, much more effective, much more productive way.
Well,
So,
it didn't eliminate the problem, but it also
right,
didn't perpetuate the problem
correct.
or exacerbate or like make it bigger, or
Right,
escalate, right? Like it didn't escalate the
right.
problem.
Well, and I think too, when I started doing that, I began to realize this, and after I did my first NLP training, began to realize it's like, crap. If I even just approaching something and say, man, this is my problem. I mean, just those two words, my problem. Like, wow, there's a lot of assumptions we have to make by saying, here's my problem. I have to
Yeah.
reject all potentials for a solution in order to own a problem, right? So it really it gets you to it
Words.
gets it gets you to
Oh
really
man.
critically think about words and the power of the words and the power of the assumptions that have to be made that are implicit in the words, right? Like um, what's the one I just said earlier? Oh, he was drowning at work.
Yep.
Like, there's there's call them presuppositions. There's assumptions that have to be made about that statement in order for the statement to be true. Happens all the time, right? If for someone to acknowledge I got a big problem, there's a lot of that's a powerful statement. How do you know it's not a big solution?
A big opportunity. Miles, you have so many tools in your arsenal and in your tool belt for growth and for mindset and for positivity. Which tool of yours is your personal favorite, or maybe one that you find yourself continually returning back to leverage?
Ooh, good question. That's a really great question. Well, just like any tool, context matters, right? There's a time and place to use a hammer, there's a time and place to use a screwdriver, right? So, depending on context, I'd say one of my favorites is I'm highly visual, and I can kind of give you an example here. You're highly visual as well. So,
Yeah.
what's a simple way to explain this? The okay, problems aren't problems, they're perceptions of problems, right? Okay.
Okay.
So here's one of my favorite things to do. Can you think of someone can do you have someone in your life that as you think about them, you get a little bit annoyed?
Yeah.
You okay, here. Pause. You do not have to say who it is. In fact, I don't want you to say who it is. I just want you to just
All
acknowledge.
right.
Do you have someone in your life as you think about it, you're like, "Oh God, they're walking in the door. Oh God." Like it's not intense, right? It's just like, ah, they're here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Oh yeah.
you have a particular person, a very specific person that you're thinking about?
Yes.
Okay. So would it, by the way, is it okay that I kind of demonstrate this with you so you can get the benefit of it while also me explaining why this is my favorite process to do?
Yeah, I love it. Application is great. Yeah, let's do it.
Perfect. Okay. So as you here's what's cool. As you think about that individual and how they annoy you, my guess is you have a picture of them in your mind somewhere, a mental picture, a mental image, if you will, right?
Yep.
Well, here's the cool thing about this, Jimmy, is you're not actually annoyed with that person. You're annoyed at that picture in your mind. By the way, anyone who's ever annoyed with anyone has a similar picture in their mind. And it's not the person that they're annoyed by, it's that big picture in their mind. Because I'm going to ask you in a second, is there another person in your life, as you think about them, you go, oh, I really like that person,
Yeah.
right? Okay. And as you think about that person, you have a mental picture that pops up in your mind, right? Now, if you were to compare those two mental pictures, the annoyed person and the person you go, oh, I really like that person. Can you notice distinctions in those mental pictures or differences in those mental pictures?
Um, are the differences that I'm looking for, is it essentially like maybe in their posture or their attitude or their actions and activities or
Or think about it like this. As you think about the person who's really annoying, is the picture in your mind in black and white or is it in color?
it's in color?
Wonderful. Kind of like you would edit a photo on your phone. You know, when you have your iPhone and you take a picture and you can like edit and go to the filter and switch it to like
Yeah.
a black and white filter. Imagine turning that mental picture from color to black and white
Okay.
and take the contrast and or the brightness and turn the dim it all the way down. So instead of it being like a 70 out of 100, it's like a 5 out of 100 in your mind, that is.
Yeah, I mean, I see it. I first off, it's weird that my brain can do this. Why
Right.
can my brain do this?
Right. That's, by the way, that's when you were talking earlier about how having an untrained mind from an NLP perspective,
Mhm.
this is where NLP becomes very powerful because it's like, oh, I didn't even know. Like I did this with someone the other day and they're like, I didn't even know I had pictures in my mind. That was the thing that came up. Completely changed. They went, whoa, I have a mental picture of this person. They saw the person and they went, oh, I'm annoyed. Well, I got them to realize that before they got annoyed, they had a picture. We can change the picture around. We can make it black and white. We can turn it really bright. In fact, we can crumble it up kind of like you would a piece of paper that's kind of got an ugly picture on it, and you can throw it behind you and put it in your past so it's never part of your life again. Well, I did this with someone. What I'm doing right, I did that, crumbled it up, threw it behind him, and now anytime this person comes into their world, whether it's at work, whether it's in any situation, they giggle to themselves because they're like, "Oh, I crumbled up that image," and so they no longer get annoyed. The cool part about it is
Hmm.
we talked nothing about why are you annoyed.
Yeah.
He would get annoyed. It would distract him from doing his job. Let's just change the mental picture. So now he's in charge of his mind. Therefore, he's in charge of his mental and emotional states. He can be more effective at what he does. Really, really cool. So I like that one for a couple reasons. One, it's really simple. Anyone can do it, right? We all have mental pictures, whether we realize them or not. We all have the ability to change our own mental pictures if we know that anyone who's watching this, now you know. You can have a picture in your mind and you can actually change the mental picture. And number three, it's highly effective. It works really, really, really well. And so I like doing stuff like that. There's so many others. I mean, if you were to take the all the tools in the tool belt, that's just barely scraping the surface. I like that one because it's really quick, it's really simple, and it's really effective.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love that. Okay, so Miles, when you and I sat down a little while ago to have lunch, uh we had some Mexican food and then we also had some habanero sauce.
That's
Um
so
you
funny.
handled it.
I was just
Sorry.
thinking about the habanero sauce. That's awesome.
Um you handled it like a champ and I was sitting there coughing up a lung like a wimp. Do you love eating hot food? And if so, what's your favorite, like your ultimate favorite spicy thing to eat?
Ooh, ooh. Yes, I love eating hot food. I've had to like dial it back over the years. I like salt, like a good Mexican cuisine with some like really spicy but flavorful salsa. That's in the top five. I like Indian food, so like tikka masala, biryani. I like a good kick in that. Thai food. I like Tom Kha Gai, the coconut milk soup. I ask for it very hot.
Yes,
I love like
with the jalapeno or like it's like serrano peppers or something like that, right?
some sort of pepper. I think every Thai place does it different, but I had to learn. I forget how
Yeah.
to say it. I remember I'm not Thai, and so when I go into a Thai restaurant, I'm like, make it very spicy. Like I can take it. If I've never been to that Thai restaurant, they look at me like, okay, we'll make it American hot, not Thai hot. I'm like, no, make it Thai hot. I can take it. And they go, and it might take a few times for them to trust me. But yeah, no, I like Thai food,
Right.
Indian food, Mexican food. I did a spicy challenge one time where I got my name and picture on the wall for eating a taco where I had to wear gloves and no, that was the moment I was like, yeah, we need to evaluate because I couldn't go to the bathroom for a few days without it really hurting. Yeah, I had to sign a
Oh
waiver.
man.
I had to sign a waiver to eat this taco.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's too much.
too much, too much, very too much. But yes,
Yeah,
I like.
that's crazy.
I'd say the top three are yeah, a good Mexican cuisine with a good hot salsa, Indian food, and Thai food.
Oh my gosh. Hey, you guys. Good morning. We have to stop meeting like this. This is crazy. So, I have another instance here where I had my wonderful guest, Miles, on, and now in post production, I need to go back. So we're figuring out some processes to the podcast right now. A lot of it's like we're learning as we go along. But basically, with the tool that we use, it didn't finish uploading the remainder of Miles's footage. We were just at the end of wrapping everything up. And so I want to do right by Miles and invite you guys to all go connect with him. He's on Instagram at official Miles Rubin. He's also on Facebook. Facebook's a great way to connect with him. Go search for Miles Rubin. Um, and yeah, so Miles is an amazing guy. He's putting out content all the time now, all centered around that mindset coaching, that performance coaching, and especially the NLP stuff is just like a byproduct of everything that he puts out. It's all amazing. And if you really want to level up, go connect with him and start that conversation. I loved having Miles on. I loved the conversation here. We're definitely going to be doing another one. And so that we don't have any technical hiccups, Miles, please come out to the new studio that we just built here at the house. And I'll have you on and we'll do this in person so that there's no way we're going to mess anything up. Anyways, you guys, the whole conversation was amazing. I'm so happy to put this out. I'm happy to get this conversation out to the world, share him, and also give you guys the opportunity to level up your lives and health, wealth, and relationships. So, have an amazing day. We'll see you on the next episode of the Better Humans podcast.